Facto president of Venezuela. I don't know, maybe you were joking when you said that. Is the U.S. a de facto member of OPEC right now?
Well, I'll tell you what, we are a very strong presence in Venezuela. We're going to get a lot of money for Venezuela. Venezuela has the largest oil reserves in the world, with the exception, I think, of our country.
Yep.
And it's bigger than Saudi Arabia. And we had a very strong moment with Venezuela a couple of weeks ago. And we are working beautifully with Venezuela. I will tell you, they're going to do better now than they ever did, than they've done ever at any point. And we're going to be making a lot of money for them and a lot of money for our country. We have a very good relationship with the leaders of Venezuela, and we're going to keep it that way.
What are your plans, Mr. President? What are your plans for Cuba, Mr. President?
Well, we're going to see what happens with Cuba. I don't know, anybody interested in Cuba in this room? Not too many people. This is not a Cuba room, but that's all right. There are plenty of them around, especially in Miami. And Cuba will be failing pretty soon. Cuba is really a nation that's very close to failing. You know, they got their money from Venezuela. They got the oil from Venezuela. They're not getting that anymore. And in June, we obliterated Iran's nuclear capacity in Operation Midnight Hammer. You saw that. People have been waiting for 22 years to do that, and we were right at the end. They were about a month away from having a nuclear weapon. We had to do it. And by the way, there's another beautiful Armada floating beautifully toward Iran right now. So we'll see. I hope they make a deal. I hope they make a deal. They should have made a deal the first time they'd have a country.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live stream, whether you're watching this on YouTube or on Rumble. And special thanks to our friend at Axios for moderating the live chat. Has any of you guys also have the feeling that the level of intellectual conversation in international politics has sunk into the dustbin of history? Do you also notice that at least like not long time ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago maximum, we used to listen to the statements of presidents, heads of states. We were used to some level of smart talk, some level of diplomatic talk, some level of intellectual capacity among the politicians. Nowadays, it's like a big clown show. Like they are no longer, as if they are no longer lines. They are no longer rules. They are no longer international law. And most importantly, you don't need to be a smart person or somebody versed in politics to be a politician. And to the extent that when I watch people like Donald Trump and many other politicians in Europe, I truly, I fear. I fear because this clearly shows that these people are not in charge. These people are just the facelit. The people who you could see, but the real decision-making is definitely behind the closed doors. And definitely not people like Donald Trump are taking big decisions and final decisions. And nowadays we have this very unfortunate situation in the Middle East again. Since we opened our eyes, if you're in my generation, this region has been bombed endlessly and occupied by different powers. Probably, I would say, in the past 400 years, this region has been in the most and different shapes were occupied and hibernated. And nowadays, this still continues, especially against countries that have some level of sovereignty and they want to become developed and advanced on their own terms. If you're not allowed to do that, there is an empire. You can only advance under the rules and the diktats of the United States. Before I started this live streaming, Donald Trump posted a post on his so-called Truth social media. And this is what Donald Trump said. This is just right now, like an hour ago. He says a massive Armada is heading to Iran. Armada is one of the aircraft carriers, I believe, or the warships that Donald Trump is very proud of. And according to him, this massive armada is heading to Iran. He says it is moving quickly with great power, enthusiasm, and purpose. It is a larger fleet headed by the great aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln that was sent to Venezuela in the past. Like with Venezuela, these American troops in the international waters are ready, willing, and able to rapidly fulfill its mission with speed and violence if necessary. I think we have to read between the lines when he says with speed and violence. We'll come back to that later. He also says hopefully Iran will quickly come to the table and negotiate a fair and equitable deal. No nuclear weapons, one that is good for all parties. Time is running out. It is truly of the essence. As I told Iran once before, make a deal. They didn't, and there was Operation Midnight Hammer, a major destruction of Iran. The next attack will be far worse. Don't make that happen again. Thank you for your attention on this matter, President J. Trump. Now, forget all the theatrics, forget all the clown show in this post. There are multiple things that we have to focus on. The first thing is that Donald Trump has sent a big military reinforcement to the region, and this could be interpreted in two ways. In one of the two ways. One, he is going to exert maximum pressure and by threatening Iran, that these aircraft carriers and these warships at the end of the day, even if Iran acquires all the world's sophisticated air defenses, but these fighter jets, if they include the F-16s and the F-35s, some of them will reach to their destination, and some of them will hit their destination. And if this destination, and this is something that is important that Donald Trump said in his post on this so-called Truth social media, that this could be quick and aggressive. And I think this is important to understand the mentality of Donald Trump in this case. It doesn't look like, for now, that if I'm saying for an argument's sake, and God forbid, there is an aggression against Iran, that this attack could be fast and aggressive in order to force the system. Some people were mad at me and they called me Zionist the other day for saying the Iranian regime. I apologize to you. I'm also saying the Iranian regime, the Qatari regime, the Saudi regime, the Emirati regime, the American regime, everything is a regime. In any ways, I will say the system. So it seems that the mentality of Donald Trump is, and the people behind him in the military team, that they would like to strike Iran very severely in sensitive places or against sensitive people in order to force the system for a compromise. They don't want, in my opinion, an opinion of many people, an all-out war in the region, especially that the regional countries, namely the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, they're not going to allow American forces to use their airspace to bomb Iran. But that doesn't mean that the attack may not happen, because these aircraft carriers can basically park in the international waters in the Indian Ocean, for example, and try to strike Iran. So in this post, we can see that one is probably the style of the attack is revealed by Donald Trump, or he could be manipulating the Iranians. Two is important, and that is in the past weeks, all the mainstream press, American, Arabic, European, all are the same. They received the script that we have to focus on the protesters in Iran and that we need to help the protesters. But in this post, Donald Trump doesn't even mention the protesters, because the real issue is not humanitarian and not human rights and not the right of the protesters for expression, but it is about geopolitics and finances. And in this case, what they want from Iran is to change its geopolitical posture. Doesn't necessarily mean they have to be pro-America and pro-Israel, but they want for Iran to be nationalist and stay inside its borders instead of being transnational and try to export the revolutionary Islamic revolution outside its borders and try to create alliances in the Middle East between different players in Iraq, in Yemen, in Syria, and in Palestine and in Lebanon, in order to build a frontline deterrence capacity against the Israeli regime. So Now that we're talking about Israeli regime, Iranian regime, and Qatari regime, and whatever. In any ways, but when we see that in the past 2 years, Iran has retreated and lost its deterrence capacity on the front line against Israel, now the battlefield is coming inside the Iranian territories. And this has been people who love Iran. It has nothing to do with the system there. People who don't want for Iran to be a victim of American-Israeli aggression. We tried to warn, and of course, we are not philosophers and we are not more expert than the people who are making the decision making inside Iran. But logic says that when you lose your buffer and when you lose your frontline deterrence against your enemy, then the battlefield will come into your own territory. And especially after the fall of Syria, which created an empty airspace for the Israeli occupation forces to fly over Syria all the way to northern Iraq, in Kurdistan, Iraq, and bomb inside Iran. And when we criticized some of the calculations and choices of Iran in West Asia, in the Southern Caucasus, between Azerbaijan and Armenia, in Lebanon, when they couldn't restore their deterrence capacity after all the assassinations which happened against one of their most loyal and most important ally, and that is Hezbollah, including the assassination of Nasrallah, then we said that the battlefield will come inside Iran, but there were people in Iran, and I'm sure that those are people with goodwill. They were telling us, do you know better than our leadership? Our leadership knows better. Who are you to teach us or lecture us? We were not trying to lecture anyone in this case. We were just trying to warn, because out of care for the Iranian people, and we don't want you to live under American, let's say, under the American hegemony, basically, like the Syrians are living under the current moment. They lost completely their sovereignty, right? So now that this is coming inside Iran, I'm sure even the Iranians, those who supported their leadership and the system for all the good reasons, they also realize that it's just logic, right? You build for 40 years frontline deterrence against Israel through state and non-state actors, or you brought all these players together. I'm not saying Iran created it, but created the axis and led it. Now this axis has retreated inside the Iranian territories. That's why nowadays Donald Trump dares to send these warships and these aircraft carriers, because although Iran is capable of, through ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles, to hit inside Israel, but the frontline players, and in this case, especially Syria and especially Hezbollah, when the situation has changed there and it has shifted in favor of the United States, then the Americans have become emboldened, and now they're coming after Iran inside Iranian territories, instigating riots, waging psychological operations, including cyber warfare, and armed insurgency against the Iranian system and against the Iranian government. And in this case, it is very important for us to distinguish between the choices made by people inside the Iranian leadership and Iran as a nation itself. And we care about the Iranian nation and Iranian civilization, and we are against any aggression, and we are against the potential and anticipated war against Iran. But when we see this movement, for example, of American forces to the region, does it mean concretely that war is inevitable? No. I'm going to explain to you now what is going to happen. In any ways, Ali Hashem, who one of the very, very few people whom I respect a lot, who works for Al Jazeera, he posted an analysis and said something big is coming. The current status quo is no longer sustainable. Iran is approaching a moment of forced choice. Either accept a poisoned chalice that reshapes its strategic posture, or confront the real risk of a war whose scope and consequences would be difficult to control. I totally agree with him, and I've been trying to say this in the past weeks, that there is this bitter pill that the Iranian system or the Iranian country or Iranian people are faced with. And these two choices are bitter. One choice is to make a major compromise about Iran's geopolitical posture in the region, and rest assured that there are times in history, and those are like you come to crossroad. You don't have much choices. You are on a crossroad, and you have to pick one of these roads. And when Assad was faced with this crossroad, he decided to leave because he didn't want to lead Syria's shift in its geopolitical posture towards the United States and towards what is called the moderate Arab camp, who want to, and this camp wants to normalize ties with Israel. He didn't want to do that. He fled. He left the country, right? And I think in this case, Iran is also faced with two bitter choices. One is to make a compromise with the United States. And I'm not championing any of these, by the way, approaches. If I were an Iranian, I would have first tried to disallow this scenario to happen in the country, because there were better choices Iran could have taken in the region, in the Southern Caucasus and in West Asia, which could have disallowed the United States to come so close into attacking Iran one more time, and this time in a decisive manner. So the first bitter option is a compromise that is satisfactory for the region and for Iran, for the region and for the United States. And this is very, very difficult to achieve because of Israel. Israel is a zero-sum game player, and Israel is very influential over the US foreign policy. And Israel's dream is to destroy Iran and not to save Iran, or not to compromise with Iran. And that's why we see there are two approaches, even in the US administration at the current moment. There are two types of lobbies pressuring Donald Trump. On one side is the Zionist lobby pushing for a war, a serious war against Iran. On the other hand, you have some of the Arab lobbies represented by Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey. They're pressuring the United States and telling Donald Trump that we can achieve the same goals that you would like to achieve through military means, but with diplomatic means. So in this case, notice this is very important. Both camps in this case, the Zionist camp and the so-called Arab camp plus Turkey, they share the same goal. They share the goal of a weak Iran, a weak that is not transactional, an Iran that stays in its own territory, Iran that doesn't champion and support state and non-state actors against Israel, including the Palestine case, right? Israel also wants the same thing, but through the destruction of Iran. So both these sides share the same goal, in my opinion, and Iran doesn't have friends in the region. They have people who can not trust at all, and there are some of the countries that they can deal with, but cautiously. And in this case, I think Turkey and Saudi Arabia are on that list. Now, our friend Elijah Magnier, he posted an analysis on his page. I'm going to screen this for you. If Iran is attacked, if the scenario of attack happens, he says, if the US attacks Iran, Tehran's response will not be symbolic, it will be concentrated on Israel. From Iran's perspective, Israel is where US power is most vulnerable. A daily large-scale missile strike, including hypersonic systems, would aim to break Israel's deterrence and expose the illusion of homeland invulnerability. That is how Iran would hit Washington where it hurts most, not necessarily by trading blows with US bases, but by forcing the US into an uncontrollable escalation to defend Israel. Now, I'm not saying that Iran will pursue this path or not. I don't know. However, in the past strikes, people expected from Iran to retaliate in a harsher manner against the Zionist state, thinking that that's the only way for Iran to stop the war and the aggression against them, because Israel cannot tolerate high casualty rate, and the Israeli state, basically, and cities are they suffer from something called the strategic demographic deficit. And that means that the population are concentrated in very small locations inside Israel, and any hit, let's say, on neighborhoods or civilian infrastructure would mean necessarily big casualty rate, and that Israeli citizens cannot tolerate that, because people say they have 2 passports or 3 passports and they would prefer to leave Israel, right? So that's what the people believed. Now, when Hezbollah created basically a buffer zone in northern occupied Palestine or Israel after October 7, and they were shooting daily on the settlements. Many people, hundreds of thousands of them, left this northern Israel into the middle part of Israel or to Tel Aviv, Haifa, and other places because they couldn't live in these settlements because they were coming under daily attacks. But they didn't necessarily leave, as many people have anticipated back in the day, right? So in this case, all I'm saying is if Iran is attacked, and Iran doesn't respond, and I'm not calling for violence, for those who are watching this is for educational purposes, this is for analysis purposes. We are studying a case. So if Iran is attacked in a severe manner, and Iran doesn't respond in a very severe manner against Israel, then we will be faced with a scenario that these attacks will be repeated until Iran compromises or falls. So Iran is in front of very bitter choices now. They have either a big confrontation ahead or a big compromise ahead. Which one is going to happen? I'm not sure. And I'm not going to give any wishful, let's say, thinking about this case. In any ways, now we have important news coming from Turkey, and I'm going to show you why Turkey shares the same goal as the United States, but they want to achieve it through diplomatic means. And this is what Hakan Fidan said. So Turkey urges US to resolve Iran disputes one by one. He says, Hakan Fidan urged the US to resolve its disputes with Iran one by one instead of through a sweeping deal, saying this would avoid humiliating Iranian officials, and added that Tehran was ready for talks on its nuclear program. Trump said last week that Washington had an Armada heading toward Iran, but hoped he would not have to use it. Speaking to Al Jazeera, Fidan reiterated that Turkey opposed any foreign intervention or attack on Iran, saying it would be wrong to start the war again. My advice always to the American friends, close the files one by one with Iranians, start with nuclear, close it, then the other, Fidan said. If you put them as a package, all of them, it will be very difficult for the Iranian friends to digest. If something might seem humiliating for them, it will be very difficult to explain to not only themselves, but also to the leadership. Turkey, a NATO member that shares a border with Iran, has said it reached out to both US and Iranian officials. Ankara has said Tehran must be allowed to handle its domestic issues on its own, warning that any destabilization would exceed the region's capacity to manage at the time. So what Hakan Fidan is basically telling the Americans, that you could reach your goals without military strike. We need to negotiate with Iran file by file and make a compromise, but not a grand compromise the way that Donald Trump is anticipating, and that is you bring everything into one package and then solve them together. No, he says that this has to be basically, I'm translating what he says, this has to be a long-term process with Iran, that we, the friends, so-called friends and regional countries in the region, we could guide Iran into this shift in its geopolitical posture, something that cannot be seemed or noticed in a stark way by the Iranian population or the people who support Iran and the Islamic Revolution there. So what basically Hakan Fidan is saying, we don't want to create a situation inside Iran that the Iranian politicians would be embarrassed because now they have to make a fast let's say, shift or fast compromises, and this could lead into discontent inside Iran. So basically, he's saying we can reach to a deal with Iran, but this has to be a slow process instead of being a long process. That's it. But Turkey at the same time is preparing for another scenario. Just excuse me, let me drink water. Turkey at the same time, they're not ruling out that an attack could happen against Iran. And if an attack happens against Iran, Turkey is not preparing itself to, contain the conflict, but rather thinking about benefiting from any possible attack against Iran, including territorial grabbing inside Iranian territories. So notice the malicious role of Turkish officials in this case and how they are thinking. They are seeing this also as an opportunity for them. So this article is published where? In the Middle East Eye. And the Middle East Eye has close ties to Turkey and to Qatar. And the author has close ties, again, to the Turkish leadership. His name is Recep Soylu. So this is not some sort of I heard from someone who heard from someone who said to his brother who had a neighbor in the balcony who was speaking. No, this is someone, Recep Soylu, who has a good relationship and ties with the Turkish regime and the officials in the Turkish regime. And this is published in the Middle East Eye, which has close, again, has ties, let's say, to Qatar and Turkey. And he says, Turkey, and I don't know why he doesn't write Turkey, he's writing Turkey. So his country wants to be called Turkey. Turkey is planning to establish a buffer zone on the Iranian side of the border if a worst case scenario unfolds and the government in Tehran collapses. Top Turkish foreign ministry officials on Thursday briefed lawmakers in a closed-door meeting at parliament, telling them that Ankara is preparing for several potential scenarios regarding Iran. And this is according to two participants who spoke to Recep Soylu of the Middle East Eye. One participant in the briefing said Turkish officials use the term buffer zone to describe Ankara's intention to do everything possible to prevent another wave of refugees entering the country. However, a second participant said the officials didn't explicitly use the phrase buffer zone, though they expressed a willingness to go beyond the usual measures. Essentially, they said they believe everything possible should be done on the Iranian side to ensure that those who might come in the event of a migration remain there. So the Turkish Defense Ministry earlier this month said that Ankara has strengthened security. Anyways, they're talking about some technical things here. Okay, so here. Turkish Foreign Minister Fidan said on Friday in televised remarks that Ankara is opposed to any foreign intervention in Iran and called on the US government to use diplomatic channels to resolve the crisis. Trump initially threatened Tehran during the violent crackdown. See how they also portray what happened in Iran as a violent crackdown against peaceful protesters. And this is coming from a Qatari-affiliated outlet called the Middle East Eye. However, Washington has since been weighing precision strikes on high-value Iranian officials and commanders it deemed responsible for the death of protesters. Imagine, like they're doing this because protesters were killed, allegedly. However, the ICE in the United States is also killing civilians, and let's see who will intervene to save them, right? Anyways, in recent days, the US has deployed all these warplanes and the MENA region, blah, 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 blah. So one issue which is complicating the plans is the presence of Azerbaijani Turks in Iran who number at least 12 million. It remains unclear how Turkey would respond if members of the group were to arrive en masse at the border, potentially triggering domestic pressure to admit them into the country. Or I would say maybe they would go inside Iran, if that is the scenario. You know, we're not saying that it will happen. But see how Turkey is thinking, the officials in Turkey. They see this crisis as an opportunity for them. If Iran compromises, they win. Turkey wins, because then Iran goes sovereign, goes national, domestic, instead of being transnational. It doesn't compete the influence of Turkey in places like Syria, in Lebanon, in Palestine, for example. It goes back into probably parts of Iraq and Iran itself. And Turkey wins in this if Iran retreats in its domestic home. And if Iran is attacked, they will not be attacked by Iran in its retaliation, because the Americans will not use Turkish territories to attack them. But if that situation happens, they are now prepared to send their army inside Iran and create so-called buffer zone in order to keep the refugees there. But rest assured, Turkey has done that in the past in Iraq, has done that in the past in Syria, and they have never withdrawn. And in the places that they have withdrawn, they have replaced them with their proxies. So they kept these territories under their control, whether directly or indirectly. And in this case, when they mention the issue of the Azeri Turks living inside Turkey, they also see it as an opportunity, because if 12 million people in Iran potentially saying, based on their ethnic thinking in Ankara, that they could say, oh, we want to be part of Turkey or Azerbaijan, then the Turkish army would intervene in these places and probably also grabs them. We're just talking about scenarios, right? But this is the thinking, again, inside the Turkish leadership. Meanwhile, Iranians and the Russians, when Erdogan was almost toppled in 2016, if you remember, they rushed to save him. And speaking of Azerbaijan, just want to show you the flight route in the region recently, because in the last attack on Iran, also Azerbaijan played a role, especially in the drone attacks against Iran. So our friend Mats Nielsen says, to understand which side Azerbaijani President Aliyev is on, look at the routes of US military transport aircraft, which are preparing an attack on Iran. Last time Iran's nuclear facilities were attacked, Netanyahu's regime planes also flew through Azerbaijan, causing a surprise effect as the Islamic Republic didn't expect such a backstabbing attack. Now, however, the situation has changed and Iran knows who Aliyev really is. I mean, Aliyev is quite clearly, even before this attack, it was quite clear on whose side was Aliyev. But the Iranians have chosen not to see that. They closed their eyes, like they pretended that Azerbaijan is somehow a friendly country for them, the same way they do with Turkey at the end of the day. And I'm not calling for animosity between these countries, right? But trusting one player is something, and being an ally with them is something, and just dealing with them as normal partners or normal neighbors in the region is something else. And in this case, I think Iranians would be very naive to think that Turkey and Azerbaijan are on their side. And I think, especially Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is very pro-Israel. It has close ties with the Mossad. Mossad operatives work in Azerbaijan freely without any restrictions. They spy on Iran. They wage operations inside Iran from Azerbaijan. And in the last attack against Iran, they also used Azeri territories to wage strikes inside Iran itself. So I think that's when we criticized Iran for supporting the Azerbaijani takeover of the Armenian populated Nagorno-Karabakh or Artsakh. Many people came and said, oh no, but we in Iran, we are championing international law. I mean, excuse me, but who is respecting international law nowadays? Is Israel respecting international law when they are occupying new territories in Lebanon, in Syria, in Palestine? Is the United States respecting international law when they are waging illegal wars, illegal regime change operations, covert operations, kidnapping presidents? I don't understand this mentality of, no, but we have to respect international law. Sorry, but Nagorno-Karabakh, those who also studied a little bit of history, it was in the 1920s, when the Soviet Union gave this territory to the Azeris, the newly formed Republic of Socialist Azerbaijan. There was nothing called the State of Azerbaijan back in the day, and it was formed after World War I. And this enclave was populated by the Armenians. And it doesn't mean that if in the 1920s, I think it was Stalin who gave it to Azerbaijan back in the day, means that they have the authority over this territory, because this was already taken from people who owned it and given to another third power through second power. And back in the day, this was the Soviet Union. In any ways, all I'm saying is politics and geopolitics is not based on your wishful thinking and based on your understanding of international law. It is based on who is more powerful than the other. And everybody is competing with everyone. It's like a jungle. There are certain limitations, and then you have the bigger power trying to dictate the rules in this jungle, right? And the Iranians are still playing with the rules of the game. But the rules of the game is set by the empire, if that makes sense. So, in any ways, I want to mention one thing. Now, this is the scenario of an attack against Iran, right? And I would like to thank our friend Anahit. Anahit Terstepanyan. Merci, Shad. You became a YouTube member for supporting my channel. Now, this doesn't mean at all that the war is inevitable against Iran. And this is an important article we have to go through, published by Axios, which has close ties to the Trump administration and to the Israeli regime. I will show you also the thinking inside the United States, and I believe this is the most possible scenario in this case. So Trump says Iran wants a deal as U.S. Armada arrives. Trump told Axios in an interview on Monday that the situation with Iran is in flux because he sent a big armada to the region, but thinks Tehran genuinely wants to cut a deal. And so why this matters? Because Trump came close to ordering a strike on regime targets in Iran earlier this month over the killing of, allegedly, of course, this is the article we are reading, of thousands of protesters. Instead, he delayed the decision while also moving military assets to the region. White House officials say an attack is still on the table, though the protests have largely been suppressed. So the sources with knowledge of the situation say Trump hasn't made a final decision. He will likely hold more consultations this week and be presented with additional military options. Those options will be enhanced by the arrival of an aircraft carrier strike group to the region. The USS Abraham Lincoln entered CENTCOM's area of responsibility on Monday. So what he's saying in the interview, Trump declined to discuss the options presented to him by his national security team or which one he prefers. At the same time, he said diplomacy remained an option. They want to make a deal. I know, so they called on numerous occasions. They want to talk. A senior U.S. official said in a briefing with the reporters several hours after Trump spoke to Axios that the White House is open for business when it comes to negotiations with Iran. If they want to contact us, they know what the terms are. And then we are going to have the conversation, the U.S. official said. The official added that the U.S. conditions for a deal have been transmitted to Iran many times in the last year. So what is between the lines? Some more hawkish members of the Trump circle have urged him to enforce his own red line after he promised to help the protesters. Others have questioned what bombing Tehran would actually achieve and are more intrigued by the idea of using the regime's weakness to push for a deal. U.S. officials say any deal would have to include the removal of all enriched uranium from Iran, a cap on Iran's stockpile of long-range missiles, a change in Iran's policy of supporting proxies in the region, and ban on independent uranium enrichment in the country. I think this is all what it matters for the United States. And that is, first, remove all enriched uranium from Iran, a cap on Iran's stockpile for long-range missiles, a change in Iran's policy of supporting its allies in the region, and the ban on independent uranium enrichment in the country. That's all what matters for them. So how many of them Iran will compromise? Will Iran accept the compromise or not? I don't know. But it's clear that we are faced now in the coming days in one of the two scenarios. Limited American strikes against Iran, which they think could force the system to compromise. So they have to guarantee the success of the operation. If they're going to carry such an attack against Iran, from the American perspective, they have to guarantee the success of the operation. So if they strike Iran and they fail to force Iran to compromise, this will increase the popularity of the Iranian system inside Iran itself, and the people will gather around the flag, the Iranian flag, like it happened during the 12-day war. So they have to make sure and guarantee the outcome. And it's very complicated for them. It doesn't mean they will succeed at all. And the second option is to exert this maximum military pressure through the buildup around Iran and try to choke its trade routes, and especially the maritime trade routes, to force the system into compromise. Which one of them will happen, I don't know. But both of these options, for me, if I want to preserve the status quo inside Iran and Iran's role in the region, both of them look grim and bitter for the Iranian officials. In any ways, when we have such circumstances in the region, it is important to assess also what the regional powers want. We assessed Turkey, and now we have Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and I think both of these countries just don't want to stay out of this conflict. They don't want to be hit by the Iranian missiles. That's why the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman called Pezeshkian, and he told him that he is opposed and he will not allow the airspace of Saudi Arabia to be used against any possible actions against Tehran. And Pezeshkian said that his country is open for dialogue and solving this issue, blah, blah, blah. And the Iranian also media has been talking about this, let's say, talk between Pezeshkian and also the Emirati officials, and they say that Emirate also rejects the American use of their airspace to strike inside the Iranian territories. What does that mean? Practically, militarily. Today, the Wall Street Journal published an article. By the way, guys, as you're watching this stream, we are around 700 people watching this only on YouTube, and also on Rumble, around 50 people. I thank you, all of you, for joining this stream and watching this explanation and an attempt to analyze the situation in the Middle East. If you like and you're liking what I do on this channel, please hit the like button, thumbs up, and subscribe to Syriana Analysis as we speak. So, what does practically mean for Iran and for these powers in the region to tell the United States that you're not allowed to use our airspace to attack inside Iran? This is an article published in the Wall Street Journal only yesterday, and the article says key Gulf allies say they won't aid US in Iran strike, limiting Trump's options. So Saudi Arabia is worried about being drawn into a conflict with Iran, which attacked the kingdom's oil facilities in 2019 during Trump's first term in office. Both Saudi Arabia and the UAE have been targets of attacks by Iran and their proxies. They were attacked by, I think, the Ansarullah. They were not attacked by Iran. And Ansarullah, because they call it a proxy for Iran, they now interpret it and say that Iran attacked Saudi oil fields. A degraded and less threatening Iranian regime is in their interest. This is true. Just like the Turkey, they want a less degraded and less powerful Iran in the region. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Turkey share this goal, but they worry about regional unrest and Iranian retribution and don't want to be the tip of the Americans' spear, said Karim Sajapur of the Carnegie Endowment of International Peace. Former high-ranking American military officers said that Saudi Arabia and the UAE moves would hamper the Trump administration's planning for military action, but wouldn't prevent it if Washington was determined to act. From a military perspective, it increases operational complexity and costs for any U.S. action against Iran, but won't stop it. This is according to David Deptula. He is a retired Air Force lieutenant general who played a key role in the 1991 Desert Storm air campaign against Iraq. Deptula also says that Saudi Arabia and UAE statements would also lower the political cost for Tehran of resisting external pressures. So the Trump administration has dispatched aircraft carriers USS Abraham Lincoln and its accompanying warships to the Middle East, including vessels equipped with cruise missiles. It also has several squadrons of F-15E fighters in Jordan. So Jordan didn't say anything about this, didn't say that US cannot use our airspace, and to my knowledge, Qatar also didn't make any comments yet. The US still could deliver a military blow by using those assets and by drawing on B-2 stealth bombers and other long-range bombers that could fly from the US or be positioned at Diego Garcia base in the Indian Ocean. I think this could force us to rely more heavily on carrier-based aviation or long-range assets coming from CONUS or bases like Diego Garcia. So in any ways, they're trying to say, yes, this will increase our operational limits against Iran, but that's not impossible. We have our bases in other places, for example, in the international waters, in the Indian Sea, and we can use more the Air Force of the United States from other locations and geographies. So this is all when it comes to the geopolitics of the Middle East and what is happening in Iran vis-a-vis the United States and Israel and the major regional powers, and how would they benefit or not benefit from this, including Turkey, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and also Israel. Now, what is happening in the press, of course, in the mainstream press is not shocking at all, because what they're doing is basically continuously peddling the warmongering talking points and selling the war against Iran. And one of them is, of course, the BBC. Of course, they only host the approved scripted people with close ties to the CIA, and they have been receiving also funding from the US government up to $1 million, I believe. I don't know. It's a big number what this woman on the right has received. Masih Ali Nejad, and she is very enthusiastic warmongering feminist in the United States, sarcasm aside. And her only solution is, of course, like Machado, the puppets of the US and the CIA, is just calling for more war and destruction. And before we play this video, we have to warn the BBC that this is a fair use, and we are simply commenting on this video, and we are not trying to infringe your copyright. We're not trying to use this footage promoting or not promoting your video. What we're doing is a commentary and analysis for educational purposes on this video, and my face is here, right? So we can see that this is for commentary reasons.
Victoria, I still believe that this is the Berlin Wall moment for Iranians. But look at the history. What happened when East Germany actually asked for help? International community got united. So they have to be as united as the people of Iran, because Iranians are not just fighting for themselves. They're protecting the whole world from one of the most dangerous cancer, which called Islamic Republic. This Shia militia...
Look at this journalist here, by the way. She just agrees with her. Look.
Which called Islamic Republic. This Shia militia is the threat of global security. What President Trump can do, I always say that. I believe that the only solution that millions of Iranians believe it's now important is targeted, calculated military action against Ali Khamenei, Revolutionary Guards, Basiji, the militia.
These people are shameless, Iran, by the way.
Opening fire against people.
These people are shameless. These people are intelligence assets. These people are prostitutes. These people are collaborators. Back in the day, it was easy to call them traitors. I don't understand. Like, your problem is with the Iranian regime. Go to Iran and fight against the Iranian regime, and go and organize your movement and topple the Iranian regime. Why would the United States intervene to topple your own government? And after everything happened in the region with Iraq, with Syria, with Libya, with Lebanon, Palestine, and everything, does anyone in the region believe that the US and Israel are the force of good for the people of the region? Is there anyone who believes that the US and Israel care about the people inside Iran? All these 3 women are sitting there, and all of them are warmongers. All they care about is power. All they care about is authority. All they care about is their fame. All they care about is their status. All they care about is their money, is their pocket. They don't care about Iran. They don't care about the Iranian people. Had they cared about the Iranian people, they wouldn't have advocated for sanctions against the Iranian people the same way the so-called Syrian opposition has advocated and pressured and lobbied and implemented and increased the sanction regime against Syria and the Syrian people. And back in the day, they said that, oh no, these sanctions do not hurt the Syrian people, they hurt the Syrian regime, right? And when the Syrian regime was toppled and the regime change happened, they just flipped the script and started saying, we need to lift the sanctions because the sanctions hurt the Syrian people. So which one is it? Were you lying the first time or you were lying the second time? In any ways, you were lying. Those people are liars. If you're an Iranian, if you hate your government, if you hate your regime, if you hate the mullahs, if you hate Ali Khamenei, it doesn't matter. These people do not have the best interests of the Iranian people at heart. These people are mercenaries. They are paid actors to sell you this war against your own country. And remember, this is not going to be a war against the system itself. This is a war against Iran. This is against the Iranian civilization, Iranian language, Iranian values. Rest assured that if there is a regime change in Iran, the alternative is not going to be democratic. It's going to be the Shah. So what is it, a kingdom again? That's democracy. And secondly, you remember under his father, the Shah, how the security apparatuses were imprisoning people en masse for criticizing the regime? Is that a democracy? And then, since when America, name me one country in the world where the American empire intervened and brought democracy? One. You will not find. Not even one. So these people know that they are liars. And they're still doing it because they're mercenaries. They're paid. Imagine someone like me who would sell his soul and sit on every major media outlet and receive hundreds of thousands of dollars in the past 10 years. Like, what does that make me? Does that am I an independent person? Am I a person with integrity, or am I a mercenary? The same thing would apply to me, right? And these people are shameless. And now what they're doing is basically they keep hosting diaspora women who know nothing about nothing. They're just full of shit, sorry to say. And what they're trying to do is reverse everything which Israel was accused of doing in Gaza. They're doing it now against Iran. Notice the pattern here. Just trying to bring this here. So she says, imagine, who is this woman? Why should be anyways on Sky News? And why do they keep picking women who are pushing for war? It's crazy what they're doing. He says, what is happening in Iran is 90 million people stuck in the world's biggest concentration camp. So what Israel is accused of doing in Gaza, they're flipping it now against Iran, that this is the largest concentration camp in the world. And then we have the $7,000 club posting videos like this, and I'm not going to show you the entire video, just for you to know. For next time, guys, you also can notice that these people are all paid on social media platforms. One of them is this guy, Alex Barnicot. Look, he says, Iran may have killed 30,000 people in just 48 hours. If this is true, it could be one of the deadliest days in human history. These were civilians. What should happen now? Like, look at this watermelon face. And this is the guy now we have to give us our like political analysis. You know, this is the level of intellectual political talk that we have on social media platforms. And this is the guy who says, oh, may have killed 30,000. Where is the source? No source. If this is true, they know what they're doing. They received the script. Those are the $7,000 club. Be careful of these people, guys. And the worst of the people are not those, in my opinion, who are foreigners and sold their soul, but the people who are part of the region, and they are doing both sidism now against Iran. And I'm going to show you one example, and this is coming from Noura Ariqat. She's a Palestinian celebrity, of course. And look at the both sidism here. She is basically posting an article by someone who is very unknown. And she says, Iranians deserve freedom and self-determination. They are being brutalized in their fight for it. This battle exceeds this moment and is being led by mass movements built over decades. Must read essay on strategy after massacre. I'm so mind-boggled. Like, this woman also sold, by the way, the war against Syria. This guy says, how you should feel posting this.
I felt worthless. I felt ugly. I felt gay. I felt that like.
I didn't know what's the content of this. Just showing you. Ali Zeda says, is this solidarity with 90 million Iranians or with U.S. Abraham Lincoln heading to bomb them? Actually, this guy is supporting it. Actually, very good piece. And this is something for Americans to think about right now. And Hussein says Iran is the litmus test. I think Syria was the litmus test. Iran just confirmed everything. These people are, I would say, very hypocritical, and they know what they're doing. I think at this point, anyone who is pushing for regime change in Iran, after everything which happened in the region, I think they know what they're doing. It's impossible for me to believe that these people are unaware or don't know what they're doing. Ali Abu Ni'mi, he posted, he said, I know that many of you are buying into really simplistic narratives, but I promise everything will be clear when you read my forthcoming article. He's being sarcastic, by the way. He says, neither this nor that. Geopolitical liminalities and the discursive reconfiguration of post-hegemonic agencies. Max Blumenthal says, just submitted my latest to the New Left Review against campism. Why George Habash was right on Palestine and Mike Pompeo is right on Iran. These people are, they're not wrong. This is what these people are not wrong. These people are complicit, my friends. They did the same thing to Syria, and after everything which happened in Syria, they just now are on the silent mode. So after they promoted for the destruction and the destruction of the sovereignty of Syria, they're doing the same thing by botism to Iran. And in my opinion, they are not just wrong. They are complicit. They know what they're doing, so don't fall for it again. Yeah. I don't know what to say. These people are really upset me because everything we've seen in the region, we were lied about Iraq the first time, Iraq the second time, we were lied about Libya, we were lied about Syria, we were lied about Venezuela, we were lied about Ukraine, we were lied about Yugoslavia, we were lied about Trinidad and Tobago, we were lied about Panama, and now we are being lied to about Iran, right? After everything which happened in the region, our friend Patrick Henningsen perfectly summarized this on his X account. He says, if any of the historical claims of thousands massacred by the regime in Iran were even remotely true, then US and Israel wouldn't have to fork out millions of dollars to pay hundreds of influencer propagandists to push the fabricated claims, all sourced from US State Department, CIA, and Soros human rights NGOs, all based in US, all to sell Trump and Israel's next war. The game is very well documented by now. Do not fall for it again. Perfectly summarized, my friend Patrick Henningsen. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in to today's live stream. I hope this was beneficial. I hope I was able to answer to some of your questions and analyze this very important situation in the region, especially with the US building up around Iran. If you like this analysis and you appreciate the work I'm doing, I kindly ask you to hit the like button, subscribe to Syriana Analysis. And if you like to do more and support the independent work I'm doing, there are different other means in the description below, including Patreon and all the other means that the people like to use to support their, I don't know. I'm a content creator. I'm an independent geopolitical analyst. I'm trying in the best of my ability to bring to you quality geopolitical analysis, my friends. If you appreciate that, please support this channel. And special thanks for our moderator, Red Axios, for moderating the live chat. Peace be upon you, my friends, and upon your families, and peace for the Iranian people. Salam.